The girl was no more than 12 years old when the weight of the village's judgment first settled upon her small shoulders. Her frame was slight, her movements delicate, and her voice soft, carrying the melody of innocence rather than the sharpness of command. She had been born into a family that, while not destitute, lacked the warmth and understanding that nurtures confidence in a child. Her stepmother, a woman driven by envy and ambition, saw in the girl not a daughter to protect but a rival to belittle, someone whose gentle nature made her an easy target for manipulation and ridicule. From the earliest days, the girl exhibited a natural kindness that extended to both humans and animals alike. She would linger by the village wells to help older women carry water, tending to their burdens with a patience that few others possessed. She spoke softly to frightened animals, calming them with a whisper or gentle touch, and she helped younger children navigate the narrow paths of the village with a quiet attentiveness that often went unnoticed. Despite her inner beauty and compassionate heart, her outward fragility became the focal point for cruelty. Her thin arms, unable to carry heavy baskets with the same ease as other girls, were mocked during the daily chores imposed by her stepmother. Every dropped basket, every spilled grain, every moment of exhaustion was met with scornful laughter or a sharp remark, sometimes delivered by her step-siblings, sometimes by neighbors who had come to adopt the stepmother's callous standards as their own amusement. Even those who might have felt sympathy often turned away, unwilling to contradict the prevailing mockery. The girl's clothes, simple and worn from constant labor, became another instrument of ridicule. Children would snicker at the patches and frayed edges, and adults would make passing comments about her unkempt appearance, reinforcing the perception that she was weak, incapable, and undeserving of attention beyond derision. Her personality, however, was not diminished by these external assaults. She was inherently gentle, quick to offer a smile even when her heart felt heavy. She learned to speak softly, so as not to draw the ire of those who ruled over her household with arbitrary cruelty. Her spirit was patient, absorbing the harsh words and laughter with a quiet resilience that few understood. She had a mind that observed carefully, noting the patterns of human behavior, the subtle ways in which cruelty hid beneath polite gestures, and the unspoken hierarchies that dictated who would be mocked and who would be spared. These observations, while private, allowed her to navigate the village life with cautious awareness. She avoided confrontation not out of fear alone but because she had begun to understand the nature of those around her, the volatility of their judgments, and the limited power she had over their perceptions. The village itself was a microcosm of human judgment, and the girl's vulnerabilities were magnified against this backdrop. Markets, wells, and communal spaces became stages where her weaknesses were spotlighted. A misstep while carrying firewood would draw laughter. A faltering voice while singing at festivals would invite whispers and pointed fingers. Even simple gestures of kindness were sometimes twisted into opportunities for ridicule. If she assisted an elder, murmurs about her lack of strength or competence would follow. If she tended an animal, skeptics claimed she was wasting time on trivialities. Every act, even those born of her innate goodness, was filtered through the lens of perceived weakness. Within her home, the situation was even more pronounced. Her stepmother's favoritism toward her own children left the girl isolated and overburdened. Chores that exceeded her capacity were imposed upon her daily, and failures, inevitable due to her physical limits, were met with sharp reprimands. Her step-siblings joined in, mimicking their mother's disdain, laughing at her clumsiness, and celebrating their own comparative strength. At meals, she was often given the smallest portions, forced to watch as others enjoyed abundance, reinforcing her sense of inadequacy. The psychological impact of this constant derision created a tension within her spirit, a mixture of sorrow, longing, and the nascent stirrings of inner strength that had not yet revealed itself fully. Despite these hardships, the girl maintained a quiet dignity. Her gentle heart refused to harden completely against the world, and she retained her natural empathy. She would rescue injured birds, comfort crying children, and help neighbors in need, performing these acts without expectation of reward or acknowledgement. Her character, while appearing fragile on the surface, contained a depth of resilience that the village neither recognized nor valued. This inner strength, untested by overt confrontation, was like a seed waiting for the right conditions to sprout, a power that would later astonish those who had mocked her so mercilessly. Her social interactions also highlighted her vulnerability. Peers would exclude her from games, calling her weak or clumsy. Adults, seeing her as incapable, dismissed her ideas and contributions. Even in moments of courage, the girl often questioned herself, wondering if she truly had the strength to stand up for her rights or to protect those she cared about. These doubts, while internal, shaped the way she moved through the world, teaching her caution, observation, and patience. Yet, these very lessons, learned through adversity, laid the foundation for the formidable strength she would later display. In the quiet moments of the night, when the village slept and the laughter of others could no longer reach her, the girl would dream of a life where her abilities were recognized, where kindness was met with gratitude rather than mockery, and where she could walk without fear of derision. These dreams, fragile as they seemed, nurtured a growing determination within her. Though the village saw only weakness, within her heart stirred a quiet flame of resilience. Each insult, each act of scorn, unknowingly strengthened her resolve, teaching her patience, observation, and the power of silent endurance. By the end of her early years, the girl had become both a figure of ridicule and a quietly formidable presence. The villagers' laughter and her family's cruelty shaped her exterior as fragile, but her inner life, rich with thought, compassion, and the early stirrings of resolve, prepared her for the trials to come. She had not yet revealed her true strength, but the foundation for a remarkable transformation had been laid. Every slight, every mocking gesture, and every act of imposed labor served as a stepping stone for the emergence of a power that would eventually astonish the entire village, turning their scorn into awe and their laughter into reverence. Every day for the girl began with a quiet dread, an anticipation of the laughter and scorn that awaited her from the moment she stepped outside her modest home. The village was a place alive with movement, chatter, and the rhythms of daily labor, but for her, it felt like a stage upon which her every misstep was magnified. Children would snicker as she struggled to carry baskets of grain or bundles of firewood, their giggles sharp and merciless. Their small hands, nimble and practiced, made even the simplest tasks appear effortless, and in comparison, her frailty was exposed. The villagers, conditioned by her stepmother's subtle manipulations, would murmur under their breath, casting sideways glances at her failure, their whispers like invisible chains pressing upon her shoulders. At the market she faced similar ridicule. While other girls hurried with confidence between stalls, balancing goods and coins with ease, she stumbled, dropping produce and eliciting sharp remarks from sellers and bystanders alike. "She can't even hold a basket properly," someone would call out, and laughter would ripple through the crowd. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, and a knot of shame formed in her stomach, yet she forced herself to finish her tasks, enduring the ridicule with quiet resignation. Even when she managed to complete her chores, the effort was met not with praise but with indifference or faintly mocking acknowledgement, reinforcing the notion that her value was measured only by her apparent weakness. Her isolation extended beyond the physical tasks of daily life. In the communal spaces of the village, by the well, near the fire pits, or along the narrow dusty lanes, she found herself excluded from games, conversations, and celebrations. The other children would form tight clusters, whispering and laughing in ways that deliberately left her on the margins. She would try to approach, to join in with a shy smile or tentative question, only to be met with rolled eyes or dismissive gestures. These small incidents, repeated day after day, etched a deep sense of loneliness into her heart. The laughter of others, once perhaps tolerable, became a constant reminder that she did not belong, that her weakness made her unworthy of companionship or respect. Even within her own household, mockery was pervasive. Her stepmother delighted in belittling her in front of the servants and her siblings. A missed stitch in a hem or a dish not perfectly cleaned would result in sharp words, exaggerated sighs, and theatrical disappointment. "Look at her. Can't even do the simplest thing right," the stepmother would declare, forcing her siblings to laugh along. The girl felt a sinking weight each time, a mix of humiliation and helplessness. She learned to bend her body and her spirit to avoid further criticism, adopting a quiet, almost invisible presence within the home. There were moments, however, when the girl's isolation became most acute in the emotional and social sense. While others formed friendships, shared secrets, and found joy in companionship, she existed in the interstices, watching, listening, and longing for connection that was persistently denied. Even attempts to speak up or ask for guidance were met with impatience or ridicule. A neighbor who might have offered a kind word instead sighed and muttered, "She's hopeless, always so weak." Each word, each glance of disdain, added to the layers of isolation that wrapped around her like a heavy cloak, pressing down on her small frame, yet also subtly tempering a resolve she had not yet fully realized. Small incidents throughout her daily life became both the crucible of her suffering and the unwitting architects of her future strength. She would stumble while carrying water, causing it to spill along the dusty paths, and children would point and laugh while adults shook their heads in quiet amusement. She once tried to assist a young child down a steep bank, only for the other children to mock her clumsiness and accuse her of being slow and incapable. Each humiliation reinforced the perception of her weakness in the eyes of the village, yet each also forced her to observe, to strategize, and to internalize lessons about patience, caution, and the unpredictable nature of human behavior. Even her moments of kindness were met with scorn. She would feed a stray dog only for villagers to whisper, "She wastes her time on useless animals." She would gather fallen fruit for a neighbor and someone would remark, "She'll never be strong enough to manage her own duties, let alone help others." These constant undermining gestures reinforced a pervasive sense of isolation, teaching her that her compassion was undervalued and that her survival depended upon inner strength rather than external approval. Her loneliness deepened at night. While the village slept, she lay awake on her modest mat, reflecting on the day's events. The laughter, the whispers, the pointed fingers, all replayed endlessly in her mind. She allowed herself to cry quietly, letting the grief and frustration flow, yet even in these moments she nurtured a private understanding of her own potential. The isolation that had once seemed like a curse became, in subtle ways, a space for contemplation, for learning resilience, and for dreaming of a future where her value would no longer be defined by the cruel laughter of others. Despite the persistent mockery, the girl's gentle nature remained intact. She did not lash out or seek revenge in her heart, though the seeds of determination began to take root. Each act of derision, each exclusion became fuel for an inner fire, a silent promise that one day she would rise above the laughter and prove her worth, not merely to those who doubted her but to herself. Her mind, keen and observant, catalogued every gesture, every whisper, every subtle signal of derision, turning these moments into lessons for survival, strategy, and eventual empowerment. By the end of these years of ridicule and isolation, the girl had internalized the truth that she would need to rely upon herself. The constant laughter and disregard of others had forged in her a quiet resilience. While she remained physically slight and socially marginalized, an invisible strength began to pulse beneath the surface, a strength born of endurance, reflection, and the unbroken compassion that defined her character. Though the village saw only weakness and folly, within her heart stirred the first inklings of a power that, when finally revealed, would astonish all who had once mocked her, turning their laughter into awe and cementing her place as a figure of undeniable strength. Even in the midst of relentless mockery and constant isolation, the girl possessed qualities that quietly distinguished her from those around her. These traits, subtle at first, revealed themselves in small acts and private moments, unnoticed by the villagers and largely ignored by her family. Her intelligence, not flashy or assertive, was a quiet, observant wisdom that allowed her to perceive patterns, understand motivations, and anticipate outcomes where others failed to notice. While her stepmother and siblings focused on appearances and immediate results, she analyzed situations carefully, absorbing lessons from both failure and observation. She learned to read expressions, decipher hidden intentions, and anticipate moments of danger or ridicule, a skill that became invaluable in navigating the complexities of her household and village life. Her compassion was another silent strength. While others were quick to scorn or dismiss the weak, she extended care and assistance to those in need, quietly and without expectation of reward. She tended to injured animals with patience, nursing them back to health, often carrying small birds or stray dogs back to her humble home for shelter. She comforted younger children who had been similarly mocked or excluded, whispering words of encouragement and offering gentle guidance through the narrow lanes and crowded spaces of the village. In these acts, she discovered an inner resilience that stemmed not from physical prowess but from an unyielding empathy that allowed her to remain kind even in a world determined to diminish her. Her hidden talents were often revealed during moments of solitude. She had a natural skill with her hands, whether weaving simple mats, carving small trinkets, or crafting tools from ordinary materials. These creations were small marvels of ingenuity, crafted with patience and thoughtfulness, reflecting a mind attuned to detail and problem-solving. While others might see only her frailty, she quietly developed solutions to everyday problems, learning to adapt and innovate in ways that her oppressors could neither understand nor appreciate. In these moments, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, an awareness of her own capability that contrasted sharply with the constant judgment surrounding her. Books, if they were available, became another avenue for her hidden strengths to flourish. She read quietly when she could, absorbing stories, folklore, and practical knowledge. Through reading, she cultivated critical thinking, creativity, and a sense of imagination that allowed her to envision a life beyond the constraints imposed by her stepmother and the villagers. The narratives of heroes, cunning tricksters, and wise elders inspired her, planting seeds of strategic thought and perseverance. Though she remained physically small and socially underestimated, her mind grew rich and fertile, preparing her for challenges that would demand both intellect and courage. Observing human behavior became a subtle but powerful skill. The girl noticed the patterns in the stepmother's cruelty, the fleeting expressions of envy in her siblings, and the unspoken alliances and divisions among the villagers. She began to predict outcomes, not with arrogance but with careful attention, learning when to speak, when to move quietly, and when to simply observe. This strategic awareness provided a sense of control over her circumstances, an internal strength that contrasted with the helplessness others assumed she felt. Each observation, each quietly noted detail, contributed to an accumulating wisdom that would later guide her in moments of danger, confrontation, and eventual empowerment. Even in physical tasks, the girl discovered resilience that belied her outward frailty. While she struggled with burdens that seemed simple to others, she learned to conserve energy, find balance, and pace herself. Repetition of small, physically taxing chores taught her endurance, patience, and problem-solving in real time. She developed an ability to approach difficulties with careful calculation rather than panic, understanding the limits of her body while simultaneously finding ways to overcome them. These lessons, though small, added layers to her hidden strength, fortifying her mind and spirit as much as her body. Her emotional intelligence was another cornerstone of her emerging resilience. She learned to navigate the complex social landscape of the village, interpreting hidden meanings in words, understanding when silence was safer than protest, and when subtle action could avert greater harm. She empathized with those who were similarly marginalized, forming unspoken bonds with individuals who also felt the sting of judgment or exclusion. Through these interactions she practiced diplomacy, patience, and subtle leadership, skills that, while unnoticed at first, laid the groundwork for her eventual emergence as a figure of authority and respect. Moments of adversity became opportunities to recognize her own fortitude. Each insult, each act of derision, each instance of exclusion revealed the depth of her inner resources. She discovered that she could endure more than she had imagined, that her mind could adapt to challenges, and that her spirit could remain intact even when surrounded by cruelty. These realizations nurtured a quiet confidence, an understanding that her true power was not measured by the laughter of others but by her ability to remain composed, thoughtful, and compassionate despite it. Her creativity, combined with patience and intelligence, allowed her to find small joys and solutions in her constrained environment. She could fashion toys from scraps for younger children, create clever ways to accomplish chores more efficiently, or develop hidden systems to protect herself from harm. Each act, small as it might seem, reinforced her sense of agency, reminding her that even within the limitations imposed by others, she retained the power to shape her experience. By the end of this period, the girl had begun to understand that the judgments of the village, the mockery of her stepmother, and the laughter of peers were external forces that could not define her true capability. Her hidden strengths, intelligence, compassion, creativity, observation, and resilience, formed the foundation of a power that was unseen but undeniable. These qualities would soon manifest more visibly, surprising those who had doubted her, transforming her from a fragile, ridiculed child into a force capable of challenging injustice, asserting her worth and commanding respect. The seeds of her remarkable transformation were firmly in place, nurtured by adversity and tempered by patience, ready to bloom when the moment of reckoning arrived. The day began like any other, with the girl rising before the sun, her small frame moving quietly through the household to avoid drawing attention. She had long learned to anticipate the moods of her stepmother and step-siblings, to time her movements carefully, and to perform her chores with as little error as possible. Yet, despite her carefulness, this particular day would become a turning point, a moment in which the delicate balance of her life, between enduring mockery and asserting any small measure of control, would be violently upended. It started with a simple task assigned by her stepmother, who, as always, delighted in testing the girl's perceived weakness. She was instructed to fetch water from the river, carrying the heaviest jugs while balancing a bundle of firewood on her frail shoulders. Villagers watched with mild amusement as she struggled along the dusty path, wobbling under the weight, and murmured among themselves about her incompetence. Her step-siblings, trailing behind, whispered cruel comments and snickered at every stumble, reinforcing the narrative that she was weak, incapable, and deserving of derision. Halfway to the river, a sudden misstep sent one of the jugs tumbling down the rocky bank, shattering with a loud crash that echoed through the village. The girl froze, her heart pounding in terror. She had not only failed in her task, but she had also provided fodder for the laughter and judgment she had come to anticipate with dread. Villagers, witnessing the mishap, pointed and mocked her, their voices carrying harshly across the landscape. Her cheeks flushed with shame, her body trembling from both exhaustion and humiliation. Even as she scrambled to retrieve what she could, a sense of despair began to settle into her chest, pressing down like the very weight of the broken jug. Returning home, she was met with the full force of her stepmother's wrath. The woman's face was a mask of fury, her voice sharp and cutting as she berated the girl for clumsiness, laziness, and incompetence. Her step-siblings joined in, laughing cruelly, exaggerating her faults, and relishing the spectacle of her suffering. The girl's attempts to explain, to plead for understanding, were met with disbelief and further mockery. The scene escalated until the girl, feeling the sting of tears behind her eyes, retreated to a quiet corner of the house, hoping for a moment of reprieve. It was in that corner, away from prying eyes, that the first stirrings of determination began to awaken. She recognized, with startling clarity, that the humiliation and judgment of others were not reflections of her true value or capability. The repeated ridicule, the constant demands, and the endless labor had shaped her body and spirit to endure, yet they had not broken the essential core of her being. In that moment of isolation, she allowed herself to imagine a life in which she was not defined by the perceptions of others, a life where her abilities, intelligence, and kindness could manifest freely, unencumbered by fear or scorn. As the day progressed, further challenges arose, each testing her resolve. Her stepmother, sensing the lingering defiance in the girl's posture, devised a crueler task: to clean the large storage room filled with dusty grains, broken tools, and cobwebbed corners. The work was exhausting and seemingly endless, and the girl's body ached with fatigue. Yet, rather than succumbing entirely to despair, she began to approach each task with a quiet focus, observing the inefficiencies in the room, organizing the scattered items, and finding small ways to reduce the strain on herself. These subtle adjustments, unnoticed by the stepmother and siblings, reflected the first tangible expression of her inner strength, emerging from a place that had long been suppressed by mockery and labor. A sudden accident nearly cost her life that afternoon. A stack of grain sacks, improperly secured, toppled toward her as she reached to adjust a particularly high pile. She barely dodged in time, but the noise drew the attention of her stepmother, who interpreted the incident not as near tragedy but as yet another failure to be exploited. The stepmother's shouting reached a crescendo, a torrent of accusations, threats, and blame, and the girl felt the familiar crushing weight of helplessness. Yet even in the face of this immediate danger, she felt an unexpected surge of clarity. She could no longer remain entirely passive. She needed to find ways to protect herself, to assert her presence, and to cultivate the power that had been simmering quietly within her all along. The humiliation of the day was compounded when villagers, hearing the commotion, gathered at the edges of the property. Their laughter, previously a distant hum in her life, now rang sharply in her ears, echoing the constant judgment she had endured for years. In those moments of public spectacle, the girl realized that endurance alone was no longer enough. She needed strategy, foresight, and courage to navigate a world that had consistently treated her as weak and inconsequential. Her mind, sharpened by years of observation and quiet intelligence, began to formulate thoughts about how she might turn these adversities into a source of empowerment. By the evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the girl's physical exhaustion was matched by a growing internal resolve. Each act of cruelty, each mocking glance, each accidental mishap had contributed to a slow crystallization of purpose. She recognized that the limitations others perceived in her were largely projections of their own insecurities and malice, and that by embracing her inner strengths, intelligence, compassion, patience, and resilience, she could begin to transcend the confines imposed upon her. In the solitude of her modest room that night, she began to make silent vows. She would no longer allow the laughter of others to dictate her worth. She would learn, grow, and prepare herself for the day when she could assert her dignity and command respect. The dangerous and humiliating events of the day, instead of crushing her spirit, had illuminated a path forward. The girl understood that her transformation would not be instantaneous but that the foundation for courage and eventual power had been laid. The seeds of determination, sown in the soil of adversity and nurtured by the trials she had endured, were beginning to sprout. By the time the village slept, the girl was no longer entirely the fragile, passive figure she had been at dawn. Her body remained tired, her spirit tested, yet her mind was awake with plans and visions of the strength that lay ahead. The day's humiliations had revealed not only her vulnerabilities but also the hidden potential that adversity had cultivated. In facing extreme challenges and public scorn, she had discovered a kernel of inner fire, a nascent determination that would, in time, grow into the unstoppable force the village would one day recognize and respect. The girl's journey toward strength began quietly, in the hidden spaces of her life where no one could observe her. The harsh experiences of mockery, labor, and humiliation had forged in her an acute awareness of her own limitations, but they had also revealed the untapped potential within her. Recognizing that endurance alone would not secure her future, she resolved to cultivate strength in every sense, physical, mental, and spiritual, so that she could eventually confront her oppressors and assert her rightful place in the village. Physical training was the first arena in which she tested her resolve. She began with small exercises, building stamina and flexibility through daily routines that were integrated seamlessly into her chores. Carrying water, sweeping the courtyards, and stacking firewood were no longer mere tasks assigned by her stepmother. They became exercises in endurance, balance, and controlled strength. She experimented with the weight of each load, adjusting her stance and posture to prevent injury and improve efficiency. Over time, she noticed subtle changes. Her arms grew stronger, her legs more resilient, and her coordination sharper. These improvements, though gradual, instilled a growing sense of agency and accomplishment, showing her that her body, once perceived as weak, could be trained to achieve remarkable feats. Simultaneously, she devoted herself to mental development. Drawing on the lessons of observation, empathy, and intelligence that she had cultivated during her years of marginalization, she began practicing strategic thinking. She simulated scenarios in her mind, imagining confrontations with her stepmother, siblings, and mocking villagers. She anticipated their reactions, planned counteractions, and refined her judgment with each exercise. Mental discipline became a form of empowerment, reinforcing her confidence and reducing the fear that had long accompanied every interaction. By envisioning possible outcomes and preparing for challenges in advance, she learned to navigate her environment with deliberate intent, rather than reacting impulsively or with anxiety. Spiritual growth, though less tangible, was equally vital to her transformation. She spent hours in quiet reflection, listening to the whispers of her ancestors and seeking guidance through prayer, meditation, or dreams. Occasionally visions would appear, symbols, messages, or omens, that she interpreted as encouragement or direction. These experiences fostered a sense of connection to forces beyond her immediate comprehension, reinforcing the belief that she was not alone in her struggles. The girl began to internalize the notion that her destiny was intertwined with these spiritual currents and that her perseverance and integrity could channel this guidance into tangible strength. Allies gradually emerged along the way, drawn by her kindness, intelligence, and unyielding spirit. Other villagers who had quietly observed her suffering began offering assistance in subtle ways, sharing knowledge, passing along encouragement, or providing small practical tools to help her in her physical training. Occasionally, an older mentor figure, whether human or mystical, would appear, imparting lessons in combat, strategy, or the art of persuasion. These relationships were built on trust, mutual respect, and shared understanding, nurturing the girl's growth while reinforcing the importance of collaboration. Early victories, though modest, played a critical role in bolstering her confidence. A successful leap across a stream, a perfectly executed task that outshone her step-siblings, or even a strategic maneuver that allowed her to avoid punishment became evidence of her progress. Each triumph, no matter how small, demonstrated that her efforts were effective and that her potential was real. The girl began cataloging these successes internally, using them as reminders that she was capable of overcoming challenges, even in an environment that had historically underestimated her. The integration of physical, mental, and spiritual training created a synergy that amplified her growth. She found that endurance strengthened her mind, while clarity of thought enhanced her physical coordination. Spiritual insight provided guidance, allowing her to prioritize objectives and avoid unnecessary risks. Over time, this holistic approach fostered a sense of harmony within her, a balance between body, mind, and spirit that made her increasingly resilient, focused, and self-assured. The girl's transformation did not go unnoticed entirely, though it remained hidden from her stepmother and those who might exploit her progress prematurely. Her inner poise, quiet confidence, and improved capabilities subtly influenced interactions with neighbors, children, and sympathetic villagers. These incremental changes in demeanor and ability began to shift perceptions, creating a ripple effect that slowly redefined her presence in the village. Even minor acknowledgments of her skill or composure reinforced her belief in her own power, strengthening her resolve to continue her rigorous path of development. Emotional resilience was nurtured alongside physical and mental strength. She confronted lingering fears, memories of past humiliation, and the emotional scars inflicted by years of derision. Through meditation, reflection, and deliberate action, she learned to convert these wounds into motivation rather than despair. Each act of discipline, each successful exercise, and each insight gained from observation became a small victory over the psychological constraints imposed by others. This cumulative process allowed her to develop a sense of invincibility, not in arrogance, but in the profound awareness of her own capabilities and preparation. By the culmination of this period, the girl had grown remarkably in multiple dimensions. Her body was stronger, her mind sharper, her spirit connected to forces beyond the tangible, and her confidence fortified through both practice and success. The foundation for her eventual emergence as a force to be reckoned with was now firmly established. The once fragile and mocked girl had begun her transformation into a figure whose strength, cunning, and courage would soon become evident to all, capable of confronting cruelty and inspiring respect. As the girl continued her journey of training and growth, new challenges arose almost daily, testing the strength she had painstakingly cultivated. Each obstacle, whether physical, mental, or social, became an opportunity to refine her abilities and solidify her determination. The villagers, steeped in their habitual skepticism, continued to doubt her capabilities, often sneering at her efforts or dismissing her quiet successes. Yet these doubts no longer weakened her spirit. Instead, they served as motivation, pushing her to prove, primarily to herself, that her potential was far greater than anyone had imagined. Physical challenges remained ever present. Carrying heavier loads, running longer distances, or performing tasks that demanded endurance tested her body continually. Early in her training she would stumble, fall, or fatigue quickly, but each misstep became a lesson. She learned to pace herself, observe her own limits, and adjust her methods for greater efficiency. As she mastered these tasks, previously insurmountable chores became manageable, and even enjoyable in the sense of accomplishment they provided. Her body, once frail and ridiculed, transformed into a capable and resilient instrument, able to face obstacles with a newfound confidence. Social challenges proved equally demanding. Villagers whispered about her behind her back, questioning whether she could truly change or succeed. Some attempted to sabotage her efforts, dismissing her accomplishments as luck or coincidence. The girl, however, had developed keen observation skills, allowing her to anticipate such interference and respond calmly. She learned to navigate these social dynamics strategically, engaging allies discreetly while avoiding unnecessary confrontations. This social intelligence became a critical part of her growing competence, providing her with the skills to influence her environment subtly and protect herself from harm. Emotional obstacles were perhaps the most profound. Memories of past humiliation and the constant ridicule from her stepmother and peers could have easily eroded her confidence. Yet, through reflection, meditation, and repeated practice of self-discipline, she learned to channel these emotions into resilience. Each sting of doubt or insult became a reminder of how far she had come, reinforcing her perseverance rather than diminishing it. She discovered the power of patience, endurance, and the ability to remain composed in the face of provocation, realizing that true strength was as much about emotional fortitude as physical prowess. Unexpected events tested her adaptability. Sudden storms, accidents while performing tasks, or misunderstandings with villagers required quick thinking and decisive action. The girl's training in mental acuity, observation, and strategic planning enabled her to navigate these events successfully. She grew adept at assessing situations rapidly, making informed decisions and maintaining calm under pressure. Each small victory over these unpredictable challenges reinforced her self-assurance and built an inner confidence that was impervious to mockery or doubt. Her perseverance began to yield tangible results. Tasks that had once been sources of exhaustion or fear were now completed efficiently and with precision. Villagers who previously scoffed at her abilities began to notice subtle differences in her demeanor and competence, though many were reluctant to acknowledge them openly. The girl, however, sought no external validation. Her satisfaction came from recognizing her own growth and the knowledge that she was steadily moving closer to a position of strength and influence. By the end of this period, the girl had overcome a series of interconnected challenges that tested every aspect of her being. Her physical skills had improved markedly, her mind was sharper and more strategic, her emotional resilience was unwavering, and her social intelligence allowed her to navigate complex relationships and perceptions. The combined effect of these accomplishments was a profound sense of empowerment. She now understood that obstacles, no matter how daunting, were not barriers but opportunities to refine her strength and assert her agency. As the girl continued her journey of training and growth, new challenges arose almost daily, testing the strength she had painstakingly cultivated. Each obstacle, whether physical, mental, or social, became an opportunity to refine her abilities and solidify her determination. The villagers, steeped in their habitual skepticism, continued to doubt her capabilities, often sneering at her efforts or dismissing her quiet successes. Yet, these doubts no longer weakened her spirit. Instead, they served as motivation, pushing her to prove, primarily to herself, that her potential was far greater than anyone had imagined. Physical challenges remained ever present. Carrying heavier loads, running longer distances, or performing tasks that demanded endurance tested her body continually. Early in her training she would stumble, fall, or fatigue quickly, but each misstep became a lesson. She learned to pace herself, observe her own limits, and adjust her methods for greater efficiency. As she mastered these tasks, previously insurmountable chores became manageable, and even enjoyable in the sense of accomplishment they provided. Her body, once frail and ridiculed, transformed into a capable and resilient instrument, able to face obstacles with a newfound confidence. Social challenges proved equally demanding. Villagers whispered about her behind her back, questioning whether she could truly change or succeed. Some attempted to sabotage her efforts, dismissing her accomplishments as luck or coincidence. The girl, however, had developed keen observation skills, allowing her to anticipate such interference and respond calmly. She learned to navigate these social dynamics strategically, engaging allies discreetly while avoiding unnecessary confrontations. This social intelligence became a critical part of her growing competence, providing her with the skills to influence her environment subtly and protect herself from harm. Emotional obstacles were perhaps the most profound. Memories of past humiliation and the constant ridicule from her stepmother and peers could have easily eroded her confidence. Yet, through reflection, meditation, and repeated practice of self-discipline, she learned to channel these emotions into resilience. Each sting of doubt or insult became a reminder of how far she had come, reinforcing her perseverance rather than diminishing it. She discovered the power of patience, endurance, and the ability to remain composed in the face of provocation, realizing that true strength was as much about emotional fortitude as physical prowess. Unexpected events tested her adaptability. Sudden storms, accidents while performing tasks, or misunderstandings with villagers required quick thinking and decisive action. The girl's training in mental acuity, observation, and strategic planning enabled her to navigate these events successfully. She grew adept at assessing situations rapidly, making informed decisions and maintaining calm under pressure. Each small victory over these unpredictable challenges reinforced her self-assurance and built an inner confidence that was impervious to mockery or doubt. Her perseverance began to yield tangible results. Tasks that had once been sources of exhaustion or fear were now completed efficiently and with precision. Villagers who previously scoffed at her abilities began to notice subtle differences in her demeanor and competence, though many were reluctant to acknowledge them openly. The girl, however, sought no external validation. Her satisfaction came from recognizing her own growth and the knowledge that she was steadily moving closer to a position of strength and influence. By the end of this period, the girl had overcome a series of interconnected challenges that tested every aspect of her being. Her physical skills had improved markedly, her mind was sharper and more strategic, her emotional resilience was unwavering, and her social intelligence allowed her to navigate complex relationships and perceptions. The combined effect of these accomplishments was a profound sense of empowerment. She now understood that obstacles, no matter how daunting, were not barriers but opportunities to refine her. As the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, the girl stepped into the soft light with a presence that immediately drew the attention of the villagers. No longer fragile, timid, or uncertain, she moved with a confidence born of rigorous training, inner resolve, and the mysterious guidance that had accompanied her journey. Her posture, calm yet commanding, radiated authority, and even those who had mocked her could not help but feel a sense of awe. The transformation was not just physical, it encompassed her mind and spirit, creating an aura of undeniable power that silenced whispers and drew every eye toward her. Her physical abilities were the first to astonish the onlookers. Where once she had stumbled, struggled, and endured exhaustion, she now displayed agility, strength, and precision. She lifted objects effortlessly, performed swift movements with a grace that seemed almost choreographed, and navigated obstacles with fluidity. Even the most skeptical villagers had to acknowledge her competence as she demonstrated feats that surpassed ordinary expectation. Every motion spoke of countless hours of practice, discipline, and determination, leaving no doubt that the girl had transformed into someone who could no longer be underestimated. Mental acuity was equally evident in her actions. She approached situations with keen observation, anticipating the reactions of those around her. Villagers who attempted to dismiss or challenge her found themselves countered at every turn, as she applied strategy and foresight honed through long nights of planning and reflection. The subtle confidence with which she acted revealed a mind sharpened by adversity, capable of thinking several steps ahead, and it was this intellect, paired with her physical prowess, that made her display so compelling. It was clear that she was no longer reacting out of fear or desperation. She was asserting control with deliberate intent. Mystical feats added an ethereal dimension to her display of strength. Small but unmistakable signs of spiritual empowerment, glowing light in her eyes, objects responding to her gestures, or a sudden shift in the wind, impressed the villagers deeply. These elements reinforced the sense that her transformation was not merely the result of training and perseverance, but also guided by forces beyond ordinary understanding. Even the most skeptical observers could not ignore the evidence. She had been chosen, protected, and elevated by powers that demanded respect and caution. The villagers' reactions were immediate and varied. Some stared in open disbelief, others whispered in awe, and a few recoiled in fear. Those who had once laughed at her weakness now recognized the strength that had been quietly growing within her all along. The shock of this revelation was compounded by the realization that the girl had harnessed her abilities in a precise, controlled, and intentional manner. Her rise was not chaotic or haphazard. It was a demonstration of mastery, purpose, and justice. This dawn marked more than the beginning of a new day. It was the emergence of a new order within the village. Her presence served as both inspiration and warning. She symbolized the triumph of perseverance over cruelty, of resilience over mockery, and of courage over intimidation. Every step, gesture, and act of power signaled to the villagers that the one they had underestimated was now a force to be reckoned with, and that her newfound strength demanded acknowledgement, respect, and change. By the time the sun fully illuminated the village, the girl had established her place among them, not through fear or intimidation, but through undeniable demonstration of her capabilities. Physical, mental, and mystical prowess combined to create a presence that could no longer be ignored. The dawn had indeed heralded a new era, one in which the girl's strength, wisdom, and courage would reshape perceptions, challenge old hierarchies, and inspire a renewed sense of justice and hope. As the girl's newfound strength became evident at dawn, the villagers who had mocked, ridiculed, or undermined her began to feel the weight of their previous actions. The shift was subtle at first, a glance here, a hesitation there, but soon it became unmistakable that the balance of power in the village had irrevocably changed. Those who had once laughed at her fragility now found themselves confronted with a combination of skill, intelligence, and spiritual force that they could neither ignore nor counter. Every step she took, every measured gesture, served as a reminder of the inner strength they had failed to recognize and had cruelly dismissed. Her approach to the mockers was deliberate, calculated, and imbued with a sense of justice. Rather than acting out of unrestrained anger, she allowed natural consequences to manifest, using her abilities to reveal the folly of their actions. A neighbor who had scorned her physical weakness might suddenly find his misjudgments exposed through a challenge he could not meet, highlighting the disparity between his arrogance and her resilience. A relative who had laughed at her struggles might witness a subtle but undeniable demonstration of her skill, forcing acknowledgement of the courage and perseverance that had been cultivated in secret. Each act served not merely as retribution but as a lesson, showing that cruelty and mockery inevitably invite reckoning. The moral dimension of her humbling of the villagers became increasingly apparent as events unfolded. Those who had sought to diminish her experienced embarrassment, frustration, or even minor accidents, all of which were amplified by the supernatural currents she had aligned with during her training. The girl did not need to physically punish them. Her mastery over circumstance, strategy, and spiritual guidance allowed justice to manifest organically. The cosmic balance she embodied communicated a clear truth. Those who belittle, exploit, or underestimate the innocent invite consequences beyond human calculation, and strength earned through perseverance cannot be ignored. Witnesses who had remained silent or passive during her earlier hardships were equally affected. The spectacle of the girl's power prompted reflection, fear, and respect. People began to understand that her resilience was not an anomaly but the product of enduring hardship with grace, cultivating skill, and aligning with forces beyond ordinary perception. They recognized that their previous judgments were flawed and that their assumptions about weakness had blinded them to the potential for extraordinary strength. In this way, the girl's actions served both as retribution and as a lesson for the community as a whole. Her step-by-step demonstration of capability left no room for misinterpretation. Those who had mocked her were forced to confront their errors in the presence of the entire village. Pride and arrogance crumbled as they witnessed her feats, whether physical, intellectual, or mystical. Even the most skeptical were compelled to acknowledge that the girl had not only survived adversity but had harnessed it to become a formidable figure. The cosmic and moral justice of the situation became a lesson etched into the consciousness of the villagers. Cruelty toward the innocent is a folly that cannot go unpunished. The culmination of this reckoning was a profound shift in village dynamics. The girl's courage, intelligence, and power inspired a new standard of respect and accountability. Those who had once derided her now stood humbled, their previous laughter replaced by awareness of her capabilities and the consequences of underestimating or mistreating others. The lesson was clear, enduring, and moral. True strength rises. As the sun fully rose, bathing the village in golden light, a profound transformation took hold, not only within the girl herself but across the community that had once doubted her. Her journey from fragility and mockery to unparalleled strength had culminated in a moment that redefined the perceptions of those around her. No longer was she merely a young girl subjected to ridicule, she had become a figure of respect, courage, and wisdom, whose presence inspired awe and admiration. Every villager now understood that her strength was both hard-earned and divinely guided, a testament to perseverance, resilience, and moral integrity. Her new beginning was marked by tangible changes in daily life and the attitudes of the villagers. People who had once scorned her now sought her counsel, recognizing the insight that came from her experiences. Children observed her with admiration, aspiring to emulate her diligence and courage. Young women in particular saw her as a symbol that hardship could be overcome, and that inner strength, when nurtured, could transcend societal limitations and cruelty. Even the elders, who had initially dismissed her, acknowledged the wisdom she displayed, understanding that her authority and influence were natural outcomes of her trials and growth. The girl herself approached this new phase with humility and awareness. Though she had the power to dominate or punish, she chose to lead with fairness and compassion, showing that true strength was not measured solely by physical prowess or mystical abilities but by the ability to uplift and guide others. Her actions reinforced the lessons learned through her struggles. Cruelty and mockery have consequences, perseverance and courage are rewarded, and moral justice is both inevitable and transformative. By exercising her influence responsibly, she modeled a new standard for leadership and community relations, inspiring a culture of respect, empathy, and accountability. Village culture began to shift in subtle but lasting ways. Where laughter and mockery had once been common reactions to weakness, there was now a heightened awareness of the impact of words and actions. Children were taught to value inner strength, perseverance, and empathy, while adults reconsidered the ways they had judged and treated others. The girl's story became a living lesson, recounted in daily conversation and passed down through generations as an example of how courage and resilience could change lives and reshape societal norms. Her rise demonstrated that strength is not merely a personal triumph but a force that can uplift and transform an entire community. Her legacy was further cemented by the tangible outcomes of her actions. Villagers who had once acted unjustly found opportunities for redemption, guided by her example of measured mercy and fairness. Traditions evolved to honor resilience and integrity, integrating her story into communal rituals and teachings. Her influence extended beyond mere admiration. It became a guiding principle for the village, shaping social interactions, reinforcing justice, and ensuring that no individual would be underestimated or mistreated simply because of perceived weakness. On a personal level, the girl experienced a profound sense of fulfillment and purpose. Freed from fear, ridicule, and oppression, she embraced her identity fully, confident in the knowledge that her strength was recognized and respected. The scars of the past remained, but they served as reminders of her journey and the resilience that had carried her to this new chapter. Every step she took, every action she guided, reinforced her role as a symbol of hope, courage, and empowerment. By the end of this transformation, it was clear that a new era had begun. The girl had not only survived adversity but had transcended it, becoming a beacon of strength and justice. Her legacy as the strongest, wisest, and most revered figure in the village was secured, ensuring that her story would inspire and instruct generations to come, and that the village itself would never forget the power of courage, perseverance, and moral integrity.